Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft 365 Community Conference sponsor webinar series. I'm Ella Fernandez, Head of Connections at BTechly, and joining us today is our sponsor, BrainStorm. Today's session focuses on the understanding what drives successful AI adoption in 4Charge. But before we begin, a few reminders. To join the live Q&A, you'll need to register for the webinar. If you haven't registered yet, simply scan the QR code on your screen or visit btechly.com, select today's session, and enter your business email address. Once you're registered, our team will add you to the calendar invite, which include a link to join the Q&A chat or portion at the end of the session. Please note that the Q&A is not live streamed. Planning to join us at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference this April? Register now by scanning the QR code on your screen or head to nextgen365events.com and use the discount code S150 to get $150 off on your registration. Scan the QR code or visit change3e.com/grants to apply for the Microsoft 365 Community Grant Program built to help small businesses and nonprofits to accelerate their AI journey with hands-on learning, expert guidance, and financial support to attend M365Con 26. And of course, please like, subscribe, and follow both BTechly and the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. Without further ado, let's get started and enjoy today's learning session together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for setting some time aside today to join me and talk AI adoption. Setting aside an hour out of your day is no joke. And so I really appreciate the time. And I take the responsibility to return on your investment very seriously. So we're going to jump into it. We're going to go quickly. We're going to cover a lot of ground and try to get you a lot of actionable insights that you can take into your organizations to drive greater AI adoption. Before we get into it, let me just introduce myself. Now, I work at a company called BrainStorm. BrainStorm is the AI adoption and enablement company. Our focus is on providing organizations with solutions that allow them to amplify and facilitate their AI adoption. Because let's face it, you've got a day job. My day job is adoption. That's what I get to think about, work on, talk about every day. And I'm so excited to be able to help, give you some tips, point you in the right direction, and more. As for me, as you saw already on the video, my name's Chandler. I have 15 years experience doing this. I get to play with AI adoption every single day. And as you can see here, my science fair did awesome this year. If you're a parent, you know how science fair goes. But just a little bit of fun there. So excited to jump into it. And let's give some perspective for today's session. Now, I have to give you a little bit of a warning. Conceptual content is on its way. But I'm also pairing that with a lot of data, as well as actionable recommendations, tips, etc. So if you're wanting to really get into the nitty-gritty on use cases and white papers and things like that, this is not exactly the webinar for that, but I do want to get there with you so we can talk more about that, throw some stuff in the comments, let's talk afterwards, etc. What we're going to focus on today is high-level perspective building around AI adoption. Staying at this high level, sometimes referred to as conceptual level, allows us to sort of simplify and demystify what's going on in our organizations when it comes to using and transforming the organization when it comes to AI. With that said, I have an invitation for you. I'm going to set the expectations right out of the gate. Here's what I hope you can accomplish today, or what you walk away from our time together with. First is I want you to just identify 2 or 3 tools or tactics that you're going to try next. I'm going to give you at least 10 different tools or tactics in today's webinar. Doing all of them is probably overwhelming, especially if you don't have some help. But just picking 2 or 3 is much more palatable for your workload right now, in my experience. And so grab a pad of paper, open up a OneNote page, whatever that looks like for you, and just be thinking about some of these ideas that we share. What can you go try this week or this month or before the conference, as an example? Now, if you get really excited about what we talk about and more, my recommendation is you might need some help, okay? And if you want to do a lot of these things, then maybe just connect with BrainStorm, right? We just want to help. Let's have a chat. Email me, find me on LinkedIn, etc. Find some of my peers at BrainStorm. Check us out at booth 302 at the conference, and let's powwow. Let's game plan your AI adoption efforts. Identify some challenges, some opportunities. We're here to help. Don't go it alone, okay? So again, as we get into it, I want you looking for what's that 1, 2, 3 things that you can try, and then consider if you want to do more, maybe asking for a little bit of help. Sound good? All right, let's start here. Now, this is fun. I'm going to give you a second to kind of read this, but perhaps your organization feels something like this right now. All we can do about is talk about AI, right? It just feels like that's all we can talk about. And it's a little bit messy right now. If you're joining this webinar, I think it's safe to assume that you haven't quite nailed AI adoption just yet, and you may be suffering from some symptoms and some challenges of the age. And I love this cartoon. It's kind of funny. You're probably thinking about, oh, that's totally John or that's Jane or, in my organization type of thing. But truth is that you don't see any box on this cartoon of like, well, the tool didn't work. And that's because most of our AI adoption challenges right now have very little to do with the tool, with the AI models or the AI providers that we have. The majority of it is all about our people and our processes, okay? So I love this quote from OpenAI themselves, but most of the big AI providers are saying something very similar. And it's being corroborated by the industry that the technology itself isn't really the barrier. It's that our organizational readiness, our people and process aren't getting enough support. As we go through these 4 conceptual charts, I want you to be looking for the organizational readiness piece, the people, the process. What can I do there? Because you and I know that the technology is pretty amazing right now and doing a lot of good. It is hamstrung or it is limited by our people and processes right now. So that's what we're going to work on today. Without further ado, let's get to our first chart, okay? So for number 1, I picked the Gartner Hype Cycle. I'm choosing these charts because not many people have the opportunity like I do to spend a lot of time in the AI adoption mind space. The Gartner Hype Cycle has been around for quite a long time and illustrates a very consistent process with new technology. This chart doesn't show what the technology can accomplish, but simply illustrates the difference between expectation and reality for a technology. And it's fun to check out Gartner's hype cycle charts for different industries or different types of technology. But when it comes to AI, understanding that this is a normal process, that sometimes hype can get a little too high, and sometimes our discouragement can get a little too low, is helpful for managing expectations and understanding what we need to do from a people and process perspective. So looking at this chart a little bit more closely, let's identify a couple of ideas to zoom in on. First, I want you to think about this top of the chart, this what Gartner calls the peak of inflated expectations, all right? If your organization collectively finds itself at that point where you're really believing the hype, I think there's some challenges that you might be experiencing. And I pose the question, what if your senior leadership is setting your AI vision when the organization is at that point in the hype cycle? Well, you're developing unrealistic expectations for AI. You're really kind of creating an unsustainable situation. Some of you are probably nodding your heads right now, like, yep, my CIO or my CEO painted a really big picture and I'm not sure we're going to get there. Or The technology is not there yet to make that vision reality just yet. Second here is think about this trough of disillusionment. As people start to get more hands-on with the tool, reality kind of sets in and people start to feel a little disillusioned. Now, similar to that blue marker, what if we make all of our decisions as an organization and set our vision if we're at this red point? Well, the opposite can kind of happen. What we end up doing is we actually quickly quit. We terminate AI initiatives, we end our pilots, we throw our hands in the air and we say, this didn't work out. This technology is no good. We fell for the hype. Let's move on. And this represents a similar challenge. So either you're making decisions based on hype or you're making decisions based on disillusionment. In either case, you're putting your organization in a bad spot when it comes to embracing a powerful, truly powerful technology like AI. And then the last part on this chart I want you to focus on here is the difference between the blue and the red marker. This is so common in an organization where one group of individuals, especially senior leadership or executive leadership, might operate more consistently up on the hype in the inflated expectations, where managers and front-end employees and end users tend to be more hands-on with the technology and find themselves more disillusioned. And this is, I love the hype cycle's ability to help us illustrate that you might have two groups of very important people at different places on this hype cycle. And when you have that disconnected reality, it creates issues with alignment and you lose trust and motivation between your two groups. So understanding this macro force that might be playing a role in your organization starts to help us understand what do we need to think about and do differently as AI adoption experts to make sure that we navigate what's going on in the organization, we navigate the hype cycle the right way. So diving a little bit deeper. So here's some data for you. Okay, we got some concepts. Let's talk about some data. There are some unrealistic expectations that are being set in the industry, and they're only getting, maybe more accelerated. Okay, so AI is not maybe delivering the way CEOs thought it would right now. The quick quitting element, we're seeing a lot of organizations just last year pivot and abandon AI initiatives because of early disillusionment. Okay, firms just don't expect to be disillusioned with a technology, even though it happens with every technology, and they quit too soon. And then from a disconnected reality perspective, executives think that end users are not as successful with AI as they actually are. And that kind of disconnected communication means that it's really hard for an organization to feel like we're all in this together. And let me tell you, you have to be that in order to make a difference with AI adoption. So, what does the hype cycle help us think more about? And personally, I think it makes us think about what are we doing with executive leadership when it comes to AI adoption. Executive leadership is our key to navigating the Gartner hype cycle. Let me give you 3 actionable takeaways for this chart. First, set a grounded vision. Okay, you need to convene with your executive sponsor and your stakeholders and get the group to have a grounded vision in the future of AI, not one that is informed by hype and vendor marketing collateral and Wall Street prognostications, etc. A grounded vision. I encourage a deliverable like this, a short written statement that your senior executives can repeat frequently to develop consistency that we're headed in a direction that's meaningful. Okay? Get your executive leaders in the tools. Number 2, all right? They need a regular cadence of AI learning to set expectations, to not get too inflated on the hype or disillusioned, and they can set a vision that means more for the business. And then last but not least here is help executives shift their sources, okay? Outside of the organization, less vendor collateral and more peer learning. Inside of the organization, learning from those users, right? We talked about that disconnected reality. It's because the executive team is not hearing what the users are really experiencing with the technology, and they speak different languages. So getting data from those users regularly, quality data, can help inform your executive leadership. If we do these among some other tools, we're going to have a stronger executive leadership position, and we're going to do a much better job of navigating the chaos, because it can be chaotic, of the news cycle and the noise and the hype around any technology, of course, specifically in this case, AI. So chart number 1 is focused on helping us navigate and prepare stronger executive leadership for AI adoption. Chart number 2, okay? Diffusion curve. Now, this is an oldie but a goodie. It just really, really is. Now, since 1962, I believe, the study of how innovations diffuse in an organization has been rigorously and academically tested over and over and over again. Even with this newfangled thing called AI, the diffusion curve still holds water, meaning it's still representative of what's going on in your organization. If you're not familiar with the diffusion curve, it breaks up your organization by these groups, and these groups tend to move towards technology at different paces. So you have a small group of what can be considered innovators. They love novelty. They want to try the new thing. Then you have maybe a larger group of laggards on the other end of the spectrum that just are more difficult to move on a particular technology. The goal here is to help you get to a critical mass of adoption where the organization can really return on its investment. And that usually takes place as you start to get into that late majority window. You start to cross 50, 60, 70% of your users taking advantage of a technology. That's what that yellow line is representing. You're starting to get up, and that's where the value really is, okay? This diffusion curve is not about how good the technology is. It's not a predictor of success or failure, but it is simply a way to help us understand the different audiences, the different types of users that we have in our organization, and how they might have very different needs and expectations for any technology. So let's dive into this chart a little bit here, okay? So first, let's just move along this thing here. Okay, so first is thinking about your AI adoption, not in a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, because one size fits none. If we're speaking to all of our users in only one way, then we only stand the chance to maybe satisfy one of these groups, to speak the language of one of these groups, like innovators. Talking about how advanced and exciting the technology is certainly speaks to them, but it definitely probably doesn't speak to a late majority, as an example. We need to be thinking about the distinct motivations and background of our different user groups in the organization. Number 2 here is, I've seen this a lot, is organizations tend to overserve the edges. They either put way too much energy in trying to bring the laggards along, which is really just, the juice isn't worth the squeeze there. You're talking about the last percentages of value from your organization, and it might not be worth really pushing that hard. And the same goes for your innovators group. This is a group that largely does not need the level of support that you may be offering. They're excited to participate. They're the first ones that sign up for your training sessions and for your promptathons because they're excited. But at the end of the day, they're already probably using the technology or would get there on their own. What we need to be focused on is supporting more of the middle and designing things for the middle. And then last but not least is crossing the chasm here. Roger Moore coined that phrase because the most difficult part of this journey is not getting innovators and early adopters. It's getting to the early majority piece and accelerating your adoption. That yellow line starts to take off after you get the early majority involved in adoption. So how do we do these things? Well, it's important to know that there's some really good data behind each of those, okay? 85% of employees are still early in adoption stages, okay? They're just kind of getting their feet wet. That data point matches pretty closely to that innovators and early adopters piece, meaning we're right at the moment as an AI adoption community where we're needing to cross the chasm because we've mostly done it. with innovators and early adopters. We have to find ways to move past that piece, right? Over-serving the edges. Now, you can read all this data points, but I've spent too much time running around the country and doing all sorts of training and consulting and things like that to just not know that sometimes our best intentions are poorly invested. I remember traveling around Texas, working for a health organization at the time, and going from site to site, from San Antonio to Waco to Austin to Houston, and participating in envisioning sessions on how they can use the cloud. And I was so impressed with the group that were participating in all these sessions. But in a moment of reflection, I realized that almost everyone we had talked to had already started their cloud journey at the time. And then it made me think a lot about how are we investing our energy, because it seems like we're putting a lot of good things out there, but we're not actually reaching the group that needs our attention the most, okay? So I want to be thinking about those groups. And what we should really be thinking about is strategic segmentation of our audience. If you're pushing AI one size fits all, what you're ultimately probably doing is just speaking to those that want to listen, instead of actually helping the organization as a whole take their next steps, depending on where they're at in their journey. So here's some actionable recommendations for you, okay? First, mobilize your early adopters and your innovators. Use them. They're excited. They've got great use cases. They've got great value from AI. Use them, but not to just go out and evangelize. We need to be specific with them, not to just run training sessions, because they speak their own language. They speak innovator language. They speak early adopter language. They don't speak early or late majority or laggard language. What we need them to do is one-on-one convert members of those other groups, and then have those converts, if you will, be the voice to propel adoption in their group. If an innovator, if one of your champions, sometimes we refer to them, if they can help someone that would be considered in the early majority adopt AI and embrace AI, then you can use that individual from the early majority to speak to their peer group, to their cohort, if you will. So think about tactically motivating and mobilizing your champions in that way versus just having them kind of post things around on the intranet or run training sessions. Let's have them actually find people, convert them, get their stories, and then you can publicize them, okay? Build for the early majority, number 2 here. So be thinking about that group, maybe give them special attention. Every group deserves their unique perspectives and approach. But if there's any group to really zero in on, it's this early majority group. My recommended deliverable for you is to go speak to members of that cohort, okay? It's not one department, but it's a type of individuals, a type of individual. You can best find these individuals by gathering data from your applications about who is or isn't using a technology, who's consuming learning on a technology, who isn't. And from the isn'ts, from those that aren't fully engaged, you can start to extract into intel and understanding who are these folks, and let's start to get their needs and start to solve their needs, okay? You build these kind of use cases for early majority and late majority users, and they're going to start to move along with you, start to cross the chasm, if you will. And then last but not least is segment your communication. You got to do a lot of communication in change. You do. And more than maybe we're comfortable with. But we have to talk a lot. We have to compete for attention a little bit. And sending one message for everyone in your organization is a good way for everyone to feel like the message isn't for them. So start slicing up your communication efforts and create a little bit of a matrix based on your groups, your cohorts, your departments, and what type of message you feel like they need based on the data that you have available. Okay? So number 2 is all about strategic segmentation of your audience. One size fits all doesn't work. Now, number 3. This is my favorite chart. This is the J curve of adoption. And it's meant to illustrate one of the most common things that happens in change, which is we go backwards before we go forwards. All right. We commonly refer to this as sort of sharpening the saw. When you have to take your tools away and sharpen them, you're not cutting down a tree actively. So your productivity actually goes down while your skill set and your potential go up. And the J curve does a good job of analyzing that for us. Again, this isn't about technology failing or if the tool's good or bad. This is just simply about the journey that your users are going to go through with AI. They're going to have to go backwards before they go forwards. Our goal is to figure out how do we make that backwards as small as possible and make that forwards as big as possible. So a couple of thoughts. First, we need to shrink the dip, okay? We don't want them going way, way backwards because we still got work to do every single day at our jobs. So we need to be thinking about how do we minimize the depth of that dip, okay? Second here, and it's hard to show this on this, I couldn't think of a good way to visualize this on the PowerPoint, but how do we shorten the dip? How do we shorten the period of disruption, okay? And then lastly is as we come out of that dip, out of that period of disruption, how do we make sure that we don't stop short, but that we ultimately reach a rewarding recovery after our dip, okay? It's so common that we embrace new technology only to use it the way we've always used it, or just as a way to do something faster. AI is not a faster Google, though it can do that. It can do something more comprehensively. It is not a better spell check, though it can do that. AI is a transformative technology. So what we don't want to do is disrupt our day-to-day work so people can learn AI and then only have them using it to write emails and search the web better. We need that goal to be as high as possible. So how do we think about it and how do we understand this problem a little bit, okay? One thing I want to point out here is Microsoft has done a lot of data analysis, on adoption, okay? And they found that it takes about 11 weeks for benefit from AI to materialize. And that's an interesting sort of expectation to set for how long your period of disruption might be with technology or with this technology, with AI. Now, I think we can shrink that. That's the whole goal, is how do we shorten that disruption? But have in your head that like, it's not a day. It will take some time for people to get familiar with AI enough to the point that they can start doing more than what they're currently doing. It takes time to create a prompt library. It takes time to engineer context. It takes time to learn these tools. And so we do need some expectation resetting around disruption and the dip, okay? But we are seeing very tangible evidence that these concepts, these barriers, if you will, do in fact exist. All of these charts are showing up in your organization right now. Your data may vary a little bit, but there's a J curve in your organization. There's a hype cycle in your organization. There's a diffusion of innovation in your organization. And by understanding these concepts, then we have a chance to go fight what might be an invisible foe to you right now. Because maybe we don't think that this is happening, but it really is. And this data helps show it. Okay. For me, the J curve is all about management. Thinking about the J curve helps us think about how we can mobilize and enable the management tier of our organization to unlock greater AI adoption. And here's 3 actionable things to think about for your management layer. So 1, in order to minimize and shrink the period of disruption, minimize the dip, shrink the period of disruption, it takes time. So I see a lot of organizations having a lot of success by sort of quote unquote shutting down the office for a day or 2. That's a great way to accelerate and shrink that what might be 11 weeks into just a day or 2. And it's because we're not incrementally learning AI, we're really getting aggressive about it. Now that might not work for your organization or for your team, but what you absolutely need to do is encourage time and space for learning. And managers are going to be the best ones to do that or to ruin that for you. So we need to be coaching our managers that they should be making time for AI evolution and growth. Invite them, challenge them, track them on how they're inviting and making time and space for their teams. Next is if a manager, we know this, data has my back here. I've shared some, I can share even more. Is if my manager is not using AI, I'm very unlikely to use AI. And if my manager doesn't expect me to use AI, then I am expecting to work the same way I always have. That is the basic paradigm we're currently operating or fighting against with AI adoption. So you better believe that making sure your managers are using AI and expecting people to use AI is important to your success. Here's a deliverable. Give your managers a set of AI challenges or exercises that they can share with their team, they can discuss, they can work on together. And it's a good way to seed your managers with things they can talk about when it comes to AI, when they themselves may not be an early adopter or an innovator of AI. But we need them to get moving, so let's help them get moving with approachable exercises. And last here on this front and this chart is make sure your managers have a vision for what AI could do to their team. This is a little bit related to what we talked about with executive sponsors, which is like, hey, make sure that they're using the tools and they have a real appreciation of what's possible today and a vision for what's possible tomorrow by talking to peers. Your managers need to do some of that as well. Think about bringing your managers together for regular learning and giving them regular communication about use cases and opportunities and examples. But ultimately, the deliverable that might need to culminate into is a vision statement for AI for the team. Now, I know personally, I can just speak to my personal example. I have worked really hard with my team to make sure that we have a shared vision of what AI will do and possibly could do to and for our team. And I found that to be very helpful in aligning everyone's intention and effort around AI. We're speaking the same language about where we're headed and where AI is headed. And it's been able to accelerate our progress. This is a good recommendation, is to get managers doing this. So set up a feedback loop, give them some training, bring them into a meeting, send them out a course on how to do this, and then drive some accountability back. Hey, get your executive sponsor involved and have them let managers know that we want you to submit your vision statements by this date and time. And then guess what? You can use AI to analyze all of them, identify which vision statements are too big, too small, and then you can provide some coaching to your managers. Unlocking your manager group might do more for you than almost anything we've talked about today. But it's so important to invest in it because they're the ones that can help battle the J curve. They can minimize the dip. They can shorten the period of disruption, and they can make sure that what happens after the dip is meeting expectation and not just rewriting status quo. Okay. As we're going along, I hope you got some comments. Please provide them. We're headed towards the Q&A session here in just a little bit, but I hope you're continuing to identify what are the 2 or 3 things I can try, or gosh, maybe we need to have a more in-depth conversation about what's possible. All right, let's hit our last chart. Okay. This is adopt. Now this one's from BrainStorm. I have a change management background, and there's so many wonderful change management frameworks out there to help illustrate how people move through the change process. At BrainStorm, we prefer laying it out like this, using the acronym of ADOPT. Each phrase, each word represents a specific journey that we need to create for our user population. Awareness is about helping people come to an acknowledgement that change is possible and maybe even needed. Desire is helping them cultivate a personal commitment to making that change. Orientation is helping them learn how to move forward, but also helping them understand where they're at today and where that technology, in this case, can make a big impact for them. Participation is about moving knowledge to action. Just because we know something doesn't mean we do it. And I think you all can really attest to that. We all get it. I know that running helps me be healthy, but that doesn't mean I run all the time. Knowledge doesn't always mean action. So participation is getting action to take place. And then just because I did something doesn't mean that it has become something. And that's what transformation is. So looking at this chart, here's just a couple things I want to highlight for our learning today. One is invest more in why. Out of any of this journey, the piece that is most often neglected is awareness and desire. We're just not doing enough of it. We're not communicating enough of it. We're sending people to training after the first time we talk to them. And it's just not enough. We need to spend more time cultivating awareness and desire. And yes, that means more communication. That means more visualization for organizations and users. Orientation is number 2. And honestly, it's not just training. Personally, while BrainStorm does a lot of what would be considered training, I kind of hate the word because we ruined it. We ruined it because we didn't do enough awareness and desire in the past. And people got to training, they got to learning, and they weren't set up for success. Their expectations weren't well managed, and it was a terrible experience. So everyone hates going to training now. Orientation is not only about that learning component, but it is also about the understanding where you're at and where this fits in. And AI is really critical here. Use cases really matter. So it's not just about, hey, how do you type a prompt? Because frankly, most everyone knows how to type, and they can understand that the prompt box in AI is where you do the typing. And they know their natural language. So with AI, there's not a lot of really in-depth technical tricks or tips, or even a bunch of buttons and clicks. What they really need to understand is how to orient themselves towards creating value with AI and be exposed to the learning necessary to unlock a greater perspective. And then last one here is that participation is not the finish line. You have to climb the mountain to transformation. Just because you cooked dinner last night doesn't mean you're a chef. Just because you tried Copilot Chat doesn't mean you've rethought how your work can get done with AI. So we have to go farther. We have to push a little bit harder. The Adopt framework I find to be a useful tool to help us orient maybe even all of our AI adoption efforts. Throughout our presentation today, I listed off, I think if I counted right, 10 different kind of actionable takeaways or deliverables. Each of those deliverables could map to one of these stages in the journey that we're helping our users move through. Now, if you have any background in change management, you've probably come to an appreciation that there's about a bazillion things that we can do to help encourage change. The toolkit is really extensive. So today we didn't get into all the tools that are possible, but this is my attempt to orient some of those challenges, some of those deliverables, and some of those actionable takeaways into that sort of Adopt framework. So let's just speak to this for a couple minutes, okay? So awareness, again, is consistent, repeated communication. So I challenged you to help your executive sponsor craft a vision narrative. That vision narrative should be part of your consistent and repeated communication. That will help develop awareness as well as desire. Those two kind of bleed together. I encouraged you to do sort of a role-based use case audit from your early majority or late majority users. Go find out what kind of use cases they have for AI, and let's figure that out. Once you figure those out, communicating that those are possible, so there are possible solutions to those use cases with AI helps cultivate relevant desire. So as an example, if you go out and find that most of your finance department have not fully adopted AI, and they could be considered part of the early or late majority, and maybe even some laggards, but you understand that there are 2 or 3 AI use cases that are very approachable right now that could help finance use cases, finance personas. and you put that into communication to the finance group, that's going to help them cultivate a desire more quickly than if you just say, hey, AI is magic, or AI does this awesome thing for the sales team, okay? In orientation, we talked about developing a regular AI learning cadence for your executive team, among any other group in your organization, frankly. But even just thinking about your executive team, those regular learning experiences will help them orient to where AI is today, how it might be helpful to them in their work today, and give them the skill set that they need to start doing it. When your executives and leaders talk the talk and walk the walk, your organization is going to move forward. From a participation perspective, so as an example, we talked about empowering your managers with a set of AI exercises. What a great way to encourage participation, because you're giving your users a set of things to try that are going to be easy or approachable, and their manager is going to be right there with them saying, let's do it together. What a great way to get early AI participation. And then last but not least, we talked about data in transformation. There's so many ways to get really good data. Our platform in BrainStorm is built on the tenet that data drives important decisions. And in order to make change, we have to have a clear view of what's happening in the organization. So in order to understand, are we transforming the way we need to transform? We need to set up ways to aggregate that data and pull that data. And once we have the data, we need to spend time with it, as we discussed earlier. We have covered so much ground pretty quickly, okay? You've gotten like a master's degree in AI adoption from a conceptual perspective in just about 40-something minutes, okay? Again, these are largely conceptual because the oversimplification helps us demystify invisible forces that are holding your AI adoption back. Once you can look at it from a clearer, higher view, that can inspire more tactical strategies for overcoming any of these particular barriers that you might be seeing in holding AI adoption back in your organization. Cumulatively, it can be quite a bit of a job. Change was never easy, is never really that easy. But when we have the right perspective, being successful does become easier. And it helps when we have the right toolkit to enable and facilitate all of these activities. Of course, that's what BrainStorm's focused on doing, is helping make change easier and unlock the value that is living in this powerful technology to allow your organization to achieve more. So with that, I think we've given you a lot to digest. Hopefully a little bit of a fire hose there. If so, that means we did a good job. And now let's start to transition into a Q&A session, because I want to make sure that we're helping, right? What thoughts do you have? What questions do you have? And let's spend some time jumping into the questions and to your suggestions and thoughts, and see where that takes us to, again, augment your AI adoption toolkit even farther. So with that, I'll hand it back off to the team, and let's go to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Chandler, for that outstanding and amazing session. It's really great insights. To everyone watching us on the live stream, thank you so much for being here. And we'll be wrapping it up shortly. Join us at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference happening April 21st to 23rd in Orlando, and save $150 when you register with code SAVE150. To register, scan the QR code that's showing on your screen right now, or head to nextgen365events.com. To apply for the Microsoft 365 Community Grant Program, scan the QR code on your screen or visit change3e.com/grants, supporting small businesses and nonprofits with hands-on learning, expert guidance, and financial assistance for hashtag M365Con26. Now, if you'd like to participate in the live Q&A with Chandler, please be sure that you joined us using the link provided in your calendar invite. Bye.